Hello, everyone. Can you believe it's been an entire year since you've heard from me and Mac? I really hate those New Year's jokes where it's like, I haven't seen you since last year.
Oh, haha, because you meant
Really, we haven't. I haven't seen you since last year. How you been, man?
Okay, if you ever do tell that joke again, I will forbid you. I've been good. Dealing with some stomach issues. Nothing like serious or anything, but just like you know, uh, you know, if I have to excuse myself 2 or 3 times during this run, make sure to edit them out of the podcast. Um, but otherwise, good. Finally got finished the Avatar video. Um, this week I'm going to be doing before this video comes out. Probably I'm going to be doing a Q&A for the video.
I saw that. Yeah, it's a good
Yeah, I
idea.
figured. I think I'm going to start doing that before every long form.
Yeah,
After every long form analysis, just so
yeah,
if people are like, hey, you said this, can you flesh it out, or like just
yeah,
to shoot the shit, kind of go over, hey, I kind of wish I had people in the comments, you guys gave me you know a different perspective on this,
yeah.
etc. I think that's kind of a cool idea.
I think that's a good idea. I might even copy that from you because I'm working on my Mad Men retrospective right now. I'm gonna do the same thing I did with The Wire, cover the entire series, cover the behind the scenes stuff, and it's probably not gonna be as long as The Wire video. The Wire video is about like 4.5 hours. This one will probably be
Damn.
around like two. Yeah, it was a labor of love, but I like the idea of doing the Q&A afterwards, and I have been doing like Q&As before. I started doing that when I did the Lalo Salamanca video. I wanted to kind of like pitch my idea and like get counter arguments to see like, is there some kind of angle I'm not seeing before I make this video? And I didn't really find anything there that really changed my opinion. But I think I might start doing those more too, which is like a research kind of stream where it's like, here are some thoughts I have about the show. Feel free to try to counteract them, and if you can, I might incorporate that into the video.
I took all your opinions to heart and they sucked, and
Yeah, pretty
I'm gonna
much.
disregard.
Pretty much, that's how it goes.
I got a couple of those at Avatar. Some of them were some interesting points, but then a couple of people tried to like defend my big critique about the ending, and I kind of read them and I was like, it kind of feels a little copy, a little copy.
Yeah, I feel it. But how do you feel like your year went since we're recording this on New Year's, January 1st? How do you think 2023 went for you as a creator?
I mean, it's funny now that I'm looking back on it because it only came out with, let's see, I I really only came out. I'll give myself um the benefit of the doubt. I'll go by December 15th, because I got the Shield groundbreaking miracle out December 15th. Better Call Saul video, True Detective season 2 video, the Bears video, which was a shorter form video, and Avatar. So on average, what is that? One, two, three. That's like 4 long form videos, each over 90 minutes. So that
That's not
averages three
bad.
months. I think it's pretty good. Each
That's
one
not bad for a
is
long form. It takes months to make those. I know.
um, True Detective and Shield did about 150 thou right now for views. The Better Call
Yeah.
Saul one obviously did really well. Even the Bear one actually did pretty well. And then Avatar, I expect to hit 100K in maybe a couple
Yeah.
weeks. Hopefully, the show coming out in February kind of gives it a bump.
Yeah, I think
But
that'd be good.
yeah, I mean, I think I was a little bit I was a bit self conscious about like, oh, I didn't put out enough stuff. Um, but no, I'm happy with it. I think that I'm looking back at it. I'm like, it's work that I wanted to do, talking about stuff I really like. It didn't none of it felt like it was like obligatory or anything like that. So yeah, I think I'm pretty. I hope I am more productive this year.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see. How about
No,
for yourself?
no, I think your year was really good, especially that Better Call Saul. That's doing amazing. So,
Yeah.
I think the long form analysis is like something pretty special. And like I said, I'm working on my own Madman one. It's been interesting getting back into the groove of that because I haven't worked on a long form since The Wire earlier this year. And that took so much work. I kind of like just took a break from doing that kind of stuff, but I'm getting back into it now. I thought the year went pretty well. I really kind of found my groove towards the end of the year. Like the beginning, I was kind of like, okay, I'm making videos, they're performing okay. But especially towards the end of the year, I started kind of just honing in on uh, on performance. Like I knew for certain like videos I would do about like Sopranos characters like Uncle Junior or Phil Leotardo or Jackie Aprile. They would do really well, and a lot of them have done very well. So I was very happy how the end of the year turned out. But um, going into this next year, I'm gonna try to do some more like different stuff. I feel like I've kind of gotten into like a rut a little bit with in terms of like making the same types of content. So I'm working on the Mad Men retrospective, but also going to be doing some more like kind of like what you do, kind of like more general video essay type stuff about different topics in media and media analysis.
Yeah, it's the difficult thing I think with like the long form videos is that it's very rewarding when it comes out and like people see it, and I think it also has what's what I'm looking for, a sort of like a low interest rate, I guess, where it like if it's on like that Better Call Saul one, when it first came out, it didn't actually do particularly well. But then as time went on, it kind of built and built and built, um, which is hard because like you do all that work and you're like, oh god, it's not doing well. Same with the Avatar video. It's up to 60K, which isn't bad, but it's kind of like you're like, come on,
Yeah,
after you
yeah,
put so
you
much
put so
work
much
into it.
work into it. Yeah,
But then it grows, and then you check back, you forget about it, and then check back in 6 months, and you're like, oh shit, that actually is
yeah,
doing really really well. Um, so it's sort of like a weird. Uh, I have to kind of like you have to almost like switch your mind to that
yeah.
mindset as opposed to I my initial, especially when I was starting off, was like I'm looking at that like what is it, the number where it says like this video is performing the best out of your last 10,
Oh yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
you're like,
yeah,
yeah, cool, cool, cool. But then it's cool for like 2 days, and then it teeters off, and you're like, oh fuck, no. There's so
yeah.
much like mind fuckery,
Yeah.
but
I feel like the long form analysis, it's growing in popularity. Like more and more people are like getting into long form stuff just because I think people realize just like with television, right? The longer format lets you really dig into stuff more than you can with like a 10 or 20-minute video. Like don't get me wrong, brevity has its place, and there are some long form stuff out there that's just bloated and wasting time that I don't enjoy personally. But I think when it is heavily focused, like I think yours are and mine are, with like yeah, we're gonna spend 2 hours really digging into all the elements here. I think it can be very rewarding, and it's also one of those things I think it rewards you for what like people watch them multiple times. I watch a lot of long form analysis videos multiple times just because I like I might leave for a while, I might come back, and those videos I think they get a lot of like repeat viewers like coming back and forth throughout the video's length.
and it's and we really think about it, and I think people, because especially if you're a creator listening and you're considering doing a long form analysis, as much as it's like, because like you might think to yourself, it's like, oh, I've done a 10-minute video and that was a lot of work, but how am I going to do this 2 hour 3 hour video? And but really though, it, at least in my opinion, it feels like when you're ever making like a 2 hour video, you're really making a bunch of 10-minute videos in a way. Because obviously I'm not just like talking about like Better Call Saul. I'm not just like generally talking about it for 2 hours, or Avatar. I'm not talking about it generally for 2 hours. It's broken up very specific structure by season, by episode, etc. And I think once you do it like that, once you break it down, it's very similar to like outlining a screenplay. Like when you first look at a blank page, you're like, oh fuck. But then you break it down and then you get each scene and then you're like, okay, I'll do one scene and then another. And then as you get going, you're like, oh, okay, I'm actually making headway on this. Um, yeah, but starting that, just looking at that blank page right when you're starting is like, oh geez, wow. Okay, here we go.
I it's interesting you say that because I approach it the exact same way as you do. I I view it as like 10 to 20 individual 10-minute videos that get put together, and I tend to divide it like that, not just in terms of like making it easier to produce, but also like organizing your thoughts. I think it's really good to organize your thoughts on specific topics one at a time. And then of course, as you incorporate it, you try to, like, if you have like a central theme that might weave its way through there. For my Wire retrospective, it was like the kind of comprehensiveness of the whole show. So as I was talking about each individual character and each individual season, it kind of related back to the overall topic of how interconnected the world of The Wire was, and I think that worked out pretty well there. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, I approach it the exact same way. It's like individual little parts that eventually get put together into a long video.
Yeah, which like with anything, it's that's what it is. Um, so that, and again, that's like a good writing advice that I give anyone. It's like, oh, I'm writing a novel. It's like, yeah, but um, a novel is just a bunch of chapters. Can you write a chapter? It's like, yeah, I could probably write a chapter. Okay, and just write one chapter, and then okay, I've written 3. Okay, so I've written 10. Okay, okay, you're now, and I think how it works for me is like it's hard when I'm first starting off because it's like, oh, gee, this is like I'm not done, and this is like just work in general. Oh, I'm not there. It's gonna be hard, and then you get in the groove and you kind of power through it and you get started and you kind of get excited about a new idea. You're like, okay, and then for me, it's when the editing process kicks in, when I'm editing like the first 2 or 3 minutes of a 2 hour video, and I'm just like, I'm never gonna do this. But then you get going and you get going, and then you get to like 30 minutes, and then 60, and then 90, and it that last stretch is almost like it's like you're just like on adrenaline because you're like, oh my god, I want to finish this. Let's go.
Yeah, yeah. No, I like the video editing process. I hate the audio editing process because I
I
hate
do
the
too.
sound of my voice. But
Same.
when it gets to the video, it's great. I'm curious. Do you do any like either screenwriting or prose writing, like creative writing outside of just like analysis for your channel? Like, do you do any like personal projects like that?
Yeah, I've done some analysis for some friends and stuff like that. I tried originally to like write a film script, and I was never able to really finish one, more just because it wasn't really. At some point, I kind of switched over to television writing because I just thought it was so much more interesting. Um, I actually did complete 2 TV pilots, which I don't know if either of them are any good. Um, but I was like, oh, okay, like and that's another example of what one of the pilots I did was a big example because I remember how much I've matured as a writer. Is that I thought that script was done like 8 years ago when I was like, hey, this is like the perfect draft. Look, this is it. And then now I look at the draft now, which I haven't touched it in a couple years, but I'm looking at now and just how much better it is. It's it's almost like the Dunning Kruger effect, where like you first start off right the first draft and you're like, this is great, and then you put it away and you look back and you're like, oh, this is shit. Oh, this is shit. This is shit. And then eventually it gets to and that's sort of like the mind fuck for me was like, I don't think I'm ever gonna look at it and feel like it's like done. Um, but it's just gonna get closer and closer and closer to almost there. And once it's like roughly there, then you're like, okay, now I'm happy with it. But I wonder if that's like a curse as a writer is that you'll even if someone reads it and thinks it's perfect, all the little nooks and crannies. I wonder if it's our cross to bear in a way.
Yeah, because I'm in that spot right now. I one of my goals this upcoming year is to try to write some more original stuff, and possibly maybe get it into a video form on the channel, maybe not, but either
Nice.
way, just to start that process. And I'm finding it very difficult because I actually find the writing part of like making it like a analysis video very straightforward and easy because the format's almost kind of built into it of like how I'm gonna analyze Mad Men or how I'm gonna analyze The Wire or whatever. And it doesn't. it doesn't flow the same way for me when I try to write creative stuff. I used to be able to do that. I've written a novel before. I've written a film script. I don't think they're any good, but I think that becoming a quote unquote critic, even though literally no one is a critic, is the title of our podcast, but becoming a critic has made me almost like judge myself too much. Because I spend all day thinking about the greatest, writing that exists in television and film. And when I try to like think about like when I'm typing out my own script or whatever, and I'm like, this is shit. Like this is nowhere near what the people I idolize are like. And I know everyone kind of feels that way, but it's kind of been a hard hill for me to climb over in terms of just getting started writing something.
Yeah. Something that's kind of helped me with that. Whenever you think that, if like, so let's say a perfect example is Quentin Tarantino. Like, like a lot of writers got started and they're like, oh, Reservoir Dogs, oh, Pulp Fiction, and I'm sure a lot of writers felt the same way where they're like, oh man, I'll never write Reservoir Dogs, I'll never write Pulp Fiction. However, it's important to look into, dig into it, and you'll probably find out that wasn't the first. It wasn't the first thing they wrote. It was the first thing that got produced. Not only that, but it usually isn't the first thing of theirs that got produced. I think Tarantino, um, obviously Reservoir Dogs is his breakout hit, but he wrote. Actually, I'll look it up right now.
I know what you're talking about. He had like a smaller, I think he filmed it himself kind of thing before Reservoir Dogs.
Well, there was. Oh yeah, it doesn't even come up when you look at his filmography. I wonder if he. Oh yeah, no, there it is. He first began his career in the 1980s by directing and writing Love, Birds, and Bondage. I've actually never even heard of that. I'm actually curious to look into that. Um, and writing, directing, and starring in the black and white My Best Friend's Birthday, which is
That's
he
what it
talked
was.
about.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a
yeah.
lost. It says it's a lost film. And then I think he also wrote a couple screenplays before Reservoir Dogs. Maybe I'm wrong. Um, I wonder. I think True Romance. I think he wrote before Reservoir, which is not a bad script. Like no, but the point being is like if you compare your first effort to like you know Tarantino's fifth, it's like well, is he probably still better than us? Absolutely, but don't like beat yourself up too hard on it.
Yeah, no, it's you gotta like acknowledge that your first iterations are not going to be good. Like no one's first draft are really good. It takes a lot of effort. Same thing with making videos, right? It's like there's a whole process that goes into it. And my first videos were trash. The audio quality was terrible. The writing, was not there. The video editing was not there. But you improve on it over time, and you just kind of gotta get over that level of embarrassment of the first part of it, and then just accept that it'll get better over time. But it's something that's easier said than done. Like I can sit here and espouse the writing cliches I've heard my entire life, but you also just have to kind of put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard in our case, and just put in the work and get it done. And so that's one of my goals this upcoming year is to do more of that.
Yeah. What was the? You said you wrote a film script. What was it about?
I did. I might make a video about this actually. I might be like, "Hey, everyone, here's my terrible fucking movie script. You can make fun of it, make fun of me for it." It was about this guy who worked at a boba tea shop because I worked at a boba tea shop in college,
Nice.
and he gets randomly chosen one night to be the target of three assassins, and it's like a game they play, and if they kill him, they get like $1 million or whatever. If he survives, he lives. And the challenge is only for one individual night, so the whole film takes place at like one night. It involves a lot of expensive like gun fights and stuff like that I now have learned since then. It's like you probably shouldn't write a bunch of like guns into your film if it's going to be something low budget, because a guy pulling out an AK and just shooting up the boba tea shop where you work at is going to be very, very expensive to film.
Well, you never. I mean, like, there are ways that you can sort of like, especially if you like developing like a short film. There are ways you can write around that. Or get creative with it. Um, because I think, or like you think of it in, it's like you think of the gunfight in your head as like this big like affair, but then you're think about it, you're like, oh, I could probably. What if I show someone getting shot off screen, which plenty of movies do? It's like, yeah, and the audience doesn't know. They don't care. They're like, oh, why didn't I see the special effects of him getting shot? It's like, shut up, like, no one cares.
I think I saw some writing advice from oh my god, I'm blanking on the name right now. It was Tenant and The Dark Knight and Oppenheimer. Why am I blanking on his name?
Christopher
Nolan,
Nolan.
Nolan, yeah, Christopher Nolan. His first one of his first films was like Following, I think it was called, and
Following, yeah,
he wrote in that guns always look fake in like low budget indie films. So
yes.
instead, he wrote in a hammer as the weapon, and it's a lot more like visceral as a result of that. And so there's a lot of creative stuff I think you can do to like make it more low budget, but still have the same kind of like impact, and it all comes down to the creativity there.
And I feel like sometimes like that's the thing too is like it's amazing how if you've ever seen uh like the raw footage of a shot being made. It's so funny how awful it looks from the outside, but then when it's in the movie, it's like, oh, that was seamless. It looks so great, and it is really interesting. It almost like It's in a way it's daunting to look at. You almost it's almost like disheartening when you're watching it because you're like, oh, I could. How do I make this into like this? And it's um but again, it almost like instills in you the magic of movies. Unironically, it's like, wow, that's actually incredible that you can turn all this like cringy schlock into something that's actually awesome.
And it's so much easier nowadays too, because even in that in Following, they talked about the biggest expense was the film, right? It was like they had to physically buy the film, and doing multiple takes and stuff cost them money, so they could only do a couple of takes per scene. And nowadays, with you can easily film something digitally and afford a camera or even your phone, very very cheap, and have as much footage as you can, as many SD cards as you can buy. So yeah, it's the technology has made it way way easier to approach certain stuff, and video editing software is so much more accessible. There's Post, there's Adobe After Effects, there's a million stuff out there now.
It's hard, but it's worth it. Well, it's sort of interesting because just recently I've been having some not Twitter drama, but just Twitter conversations in regard to this year of film, and how I think some people are torn between like, is this considered like some are calling it like one of the best years of film in recent memory or one of the worst. Um, and I think you could make the case for both depending on what it is depending on what criteria you're looking for. So obviously, like this year, we saw, and I think that's kind of hard for like aspiring writers and filmmakers to kind of reconcile because they're like going into an industry that's almost like it's like, oh, there's so much incredible shit being made I can never match up, or there's so much crap being made I'll never, I can never make a living from this. Because obviously you had a lot of these like huge blockbusters. I think like The Flash and the Marvels, a couple others, just bomb at the box office, do horribly. But then on the other hand, you have like Oppenheimer and Barbie. Uh, two completely original films. I mean, obviously Barbie was based off a product, but still not like a sequel or anything, or like like an established franchise, I guess. And then Oppenheimer, a 3 hour dense political movie about nuclear warfare, making $1 billion. So it's like I don't know. Like part of me is like, you could even argue that maybe the fact that these big studio films are bombing, maybe that's almost in a way a good side. The fact that people aren't putting up with like the schlock anymore. They're like, no, like come back to us when like you have something to offer here. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's also been more successes beyond just, those big ones. I mean, again, stuff like Killers of the Flower Moon, even like the Godzilla -1 recently did very, very well, and
Yeah.
that's a much smaller film. And I mean, obviously, it has the advantage of being part of the Godzilla franchise, but even still, it's kind of signaling that very high. Like, if the writing is good, people will pay more attention to it. Like, I got told, I haven't watched the Godzilla film since the original, and I don't really have any desire to watch the men in rubber suits fighting each other. I mean, it's fun, but I wouldn't go out of my way to go to the theaters to watch that. But people recommended that, hey, the writing and the story in this is really, really good. It's a very human story. You should go watch it. And I was like, hell yeah, I'll go support that. And this is one of the years I've been to the theater actually a bunch. Like, for the last few years, I've not been wanting to go to the theater. One, because of COVID, but also beyond just that, the movies did not really appeal to me. And I saw on Twitter some of your arguments where people were like, "Oh, but look at all these bad films that got made," and your point to that was right, where it's like the bad films just get forgotten. I don't really care if Hollywood puts out a bunch of bad films or a bunch of Marvel and Disney bullshit. Like, those will just be forgotten with time. If good films pop up, even few and far between, those will continue to carry into the future. And I think that, like, um, the good films that got made this year were great, and I am hopeful that studios will see the failure of their kind of big franchises and the success of these kind of more well written stuff, and they'll invest more into like smaller budget, just high quality films, because those can deliver, and there's less risk too. I think, like, Hollywood should put out more, smaller budget stuff, because even if it makes a little bit of money, that's still okay, because you didn't put a lot of money into it. But it has the potential, if it goes viral, if the writing is there, that it'll make a whole bunch of money for you at very low cost.
Yeah, it's and the thing too is like, so yeah, the one point is like, people think and that's always like a really cringy, and this is like such indicative of like someone who like you can tell they have like no scope of like film history when they're like, man, back in like the 40s they only used to make good films. Like, no, bro, in the 40s they were like churning out, because like back then, TV was just, I didn't think TV had been invented yet. So, people didn't even, the movies was something that like, it was like a date night. It was just something you did. Like, you didn't even care about what was playing. You would just go. So these studios were just churning out shit. Like, they were just like, let's go, let's go. And of course, every now and then, like today, you would just get an absolute banger. You'll get a Casablanca, or you'll, what have you. But a lot of those films, it's fun. Like, kind of like you said about the Godzilla films, as fun as they are to kind of like revisit, it's kind of like, wow, a piece of film history. A lot of them are not, and a lot of people try to like romanticize them or cope. And it's like, no, a lot of them are pretty schlock. Like, compared to like the level we have today in terms of tech, like people like, they make it seem like, oh, the films we have today are like, no, like the worst film that comes out today is like probably still better than a lot of the films that came out in the 40s, like, or even before that. And again, not to like dump on those films, but again, you have to consider that like the reason we probably are never going to see those films is because they're all lost, or they were so junk they got like tossed in a warehouse somewhere, and then someone threw a cigarette on it and it burned up. Um, and and again, to your point, it's like, and like I think you can look at, if like a lot of studio films just bomb or are just really bad quality throughout a year, I think you can look at that and say, okay, there is a trend going downwards. But it's, at least for me, the issue is like, we need like I need like consistent criteria of when you say, this is a bad year for film, like what specifically do you mean by that? Do you mean box office return? Do you mean box office receipts versus spending? Do you mean critically acclaimed films? Do you mean, some? I mean, there are plenty of films that were not like Raging Bull when it came out was like very polarizing. Some said it was the greatest film ever. Some said it was shit. And then 10 years later, it's considered an absolute masterpiece. So I don't know. You can use whatever criteria you want, but I just want that to be, let's make it established first.
When we talk about the criteria of like whether a movie's good or not, I think that's like we could talk about box office numbers, but I think people are kind of disingenuous about that. They kind of use box office numbers to
Yes.
root for or against a film. Like
Yes.
no one really brings up the critically acclaimed films nowadays that have lasted that didn't perform that well at the box office. You know, I don't know any off the top of my head. I'm sure you probably do, but there are plenty of great movies out there that we hail as masterpieces that did not, you know, crush at the box office, and that doesn't really affect whether they have any kind of staying power or not. Um, so I think when we talk about that, that's people just use that for argument's sake.
I'm so glad you brought that up because that drives me nuts. Where people will say, "Hey, you can't say Avatar is a bad film because it made $8 bajillion at the box office," and someone will say, "It's like, well, you shouldn't judge the quality of the film based on the box office receipts." But then those same people will turn around and say, "It's like, hey, look, the Marvels is bombing, bro." It's like, well, hang on, like, I mean, like, I didn't see it. It probably wasn't a good film from what I've heard. Okay, um, but you can't. Why are we bringing up box office? Or same thing with like critic scores, fan scores with Rotten Tomatoes. That shit drives me nuts. Where they're like, "Hey, the critics loved it. It's like they know what's up because I like the movie." Oh, the critics hate it. They don't know what they're talking about. It's just so much cope. It's just there's no consistent standards. Um, to answer your question though, it looks like I'm going through it right now. Um, Funny enough, of because we rewatched it this past holiday season. It's a Wonderful Life. Barely broke even when it was released. It was $3 million budget, made 3.3. Uh, the Shawshank Redemption, I think, was the $25 million film made just over 28 million. Um, yeah. Oh, and it's still a pretty well internationally, but like not like anything
Yeah.
crazy.
So again, there's plenty of films like that out there, and I think we also have to consider like what is the point of movies and entertainment in general. Now, some movies out there I think really are trying to be high quality and be lasting and have a real impact on the culture. But there's other films out there I think that are just meant to entertain and you know, just be a distraction for people. And I think that's fine. I think both can exist out there. I mean, you brought up a lot of that point before, which is, you know, back in the day, people, you know, went out to watch movies because there's nothing else out there. I don't think they necessarily cared if every single one of them were, you know, these masterpieces of art that have a lasting effect. Sometimes you just want to watch, you know, the latest like romance that came out or the latest drama or whatever that came out, and it's just something to kind of to do on a Friday night or whatever, just to get out there. And I think, you know, you can say the same thing about TV. You could say the same thing about video games. You and me both gravitate towards the really well written stuff that is going to last and we're going to watch it over and over again for years. But I think equally there is a place for like, you know, like my wife loves to watch, you know, like the latest Korean romance show. She's never probably going to rewatch it because there's like the first time you watch it, you get everything. But um, there's a place for just being like, okay, this is something to put on for a while, and it will entertain me, and I'll, you know, fall asleep, and then, you know, go on with my life. So I think both of those can equally exist. I think they're both valid, and I try not to be too judgmental of stuff. Of like, if it's just entertainment, if it's just good entertainment for people, I'm fine if they enjoy the latest Star Wars or Disney, whatever. It's like it's fine.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny enough. This is actually another interesting thing that came up. Someone mentioned, pardon me, um, on Twitter. Um, you brought this up, and they were talking about what they refer to as a mid masterpiece, um, which I thought was really interesting. What they're talking about was films that are like not like they're not trying to be like these big like groundbreaking cinematic experiences, but they're just so perfect at just doing exactly what they're trying to do.
Yeah,
A film I think that fits that mold, and I've talked about it a lot, is Whiplash. It's
yeah,
a film that is very simple story, very clear, but it's told so well that it just surpasses so many
yeah,
other
yeah.
films that try to be so pretentious or like. Just recently, the other day, we watched. Have you seen The Holdovers?
No,
Paul Giamatti, Alexander Payne. He plays a professor at a New England boarding school. He's like, you know, a curmudgeon. He's like a cranky that guy, and he has to look after the kids who um stay over during Christmas break while everyone else goes home. They have to stay at the school, and he forms a bond with this one kid. And it's a story we've seen 100 times before. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
the cranky old teacher, and he bonds with the student, and he kind of like comes around, and yet it works. It just is
Mhm.
so fucking good because it's just so earnest. It's just
Yeah.
so sincere. And it's like, it's like, well, is this a groundbreaking film? Did it like do anything wildly different? No, but it's not trying to. It's trying to
Yeah.
tell the story it's trying to tell, and that's what makes it so good.
You know what's funny though
Yeah.
about that is like both. I don't know about the second one, but Whiplash. You're right. It is a simple thing, but it is also trying to be very well written. I was more so even talking about shit like the latest
Oh, just like,
latest
yeah,
Conjuring film or the latest Guardians of the Galaxy or whatever. I was like, it's just schlock, but it's fun for some people. And again, I really try not to hate on media unless it's really annoying for some reason. Like it's very, I don't know, it insists upon itself or something like that. But um, my whole point was that like media can be really deep, but it can be shallow and fun too. And like there's room for both. I will say that I see people argue sometimes that like there's only so much money to go around in the studio system, and they would prefer if more of that money was allocated towards higher quality stuff, and I can understand that. Um, but I don't. That's why I don't make it my life's purpose to hate on like Disney or Marvel or whatever. Even though I don't enjoy all of those, it's like some people probably do, and it's fine for them.
it's it's hard because it's not even that. It's more of the fact that like the way I try to at least view criticism or criticizing, and this is something that's kind of evolved as I've gone on, is if I decide to make, especially if I'm going to spend a lot of time um, on a video, especially like a long form one, what are you trying to get out of this? Is it are you trying what is even if I'm critiquing a movie, even if I'm saying, True Detective, it's a disaster, what am I trying to what are we trying to get out of it?
Yeah,
Is there a silver lining we can pull from this? Is there something you can learn from how bad this was? And as long as that's there, I think it's good. But
yeah,
I often do see a lot of sort of like negative content where it's like, it's just kind of crapping on it. And on
yeah,
one hand, it's like, well, we're pointing out flaws and it can help you sort of like pay attention to your own writing to some extent, I think. But then, and I think that there is a good brand of that. I think there are a lot of good videos in that. But then there are a lot of others where it's just like a dude saying this was shit for like
yeah.
40 minutes. And it's like, okay, it's okay. Like, I don't know
Like I mean, I get
what am I
it.
gonna gain? Yeah, but it's like, what am I gonna gain from this video? And it's just,
What
yeah.
what he's gonna gain in that case is the views and the money and stuff like that. And I get why people do it. It's popular.
And I like
It
the
exists for
views
a
and money
reason.
too, but
I like the people like it's a persona that they're playing into. I totally get it. I also try not to judge other content creators if they do it like something that I like a style that I'm not in favor of, just because I'm like, everyone's gotta, put food on the table. Everyone's gotta, they have their own needs or whatever. So I understand it. It's just not the way you or I operate, because again, um I think if something is truly shit, we would just ignore it. Like if there was no redeeming qualities about it, just like those movies that fall away with time, right? It's like there's no real point in breaking those down because there's just nothing there. There's no foundation. But if there is a core of something to explore, even if it's something bad, then that can be a worthwhile video. And I think it can be a positive one even if you're kind of critiquing it, just because again you're talking about potential and what could have been, or you're talking about potential lessons that apply to hopefully apply to future shows and movies and stuff like that.
yeah, I don't. Again, it's just a different preference, but and that's another thing too, where it's like, I bet you about this before, but it's like when people say like, is there, there's toxic negativity, is there such a thing as toxic positivity? Or is it equally as bad? And it's like, I think to some extent, yes. I think there are cases where like toxic positivity, I mean, in other ways, but even like with movies, like yeah, I think that can sort of lead people to like, oh, you're just gonna like the new film that comes out, and not even question it. Like, no, this is good. Don't critique it at all. I don't think that's good. However, I will say of the two extremes, at least the people enjoying it are like enjoying it. You know, it's like it's just it's. I remember there was the guy, uh, like one of the guys who was like really against like the Marvels. I saw him like he posted a selfie like in the theater watching the Marvels, and it's like I don't know. It's like if you know you're gonna hate it, why are you like spending money and taking your day out to go? I don't know.
Like I said, I try not to hate on the people who love stuff, because if that makes them happy, all power to you. I will say my one critique against those types of people is the people who I like, the people that are kind of disparagingly referred to as consumers, like the people who make their entire identity buying, Star Wars stuff, Disney stuff. They spend, like, I just bought this, $300 Funko Pop or whatever, and I'm like, again, if that makes you happy,
If it
all
makes you
power to
happy,
you.
yeah.
But I would urge you to consider, like, is this passion genuine for you, or is it something that, like, Marvel or Disney has systematically engineered for you as an identity in order to profit off of you? And if it's the first case and it makes you happy, go for it. I spend my money on stupid shit, we all do. But I would urge you to consider whether you're being semi manipulated by a giant corporation into making your identity consuming this stuff, and the end result is not necessarily your enjoyment. The end result is profit for those companies. That's the one I would maybe kind of have some concerns about.
Yeah. But I still almost always like have be less I would think that the person who's like doing that is way less cringy than the person who's like, did you see the new Supergirl episode, bro? And I'm like, no, what? Like or I told you I still get people who are like, hey man, if you were gonna like review like She-Hulk or something, I'm like, no, why would I ever review She-Hulk? No.
Being too obsessed with anything, I think, is not good. And I say that as someone who, I could easily forgive you if you assume I'm obsessed with The Sopranos. Like, yes, I do a lot of stuff about that, but it actually is not a huge part of my identity, to the point where, again, if someone told me they hate The Sopranos, it sucks or whatever, I'd be like, all right, that's cool. It doesn't bother me. It's because it's not a core tenet of my identity where if someone disagrees with me, it would offend me. Like, I don't really, it's just a TV show. I don't really give a shit.
Unless you don't like Michael Clayton.
I saw you posted about that. Yeah.
Unless you don't like Michael Clayton. Anything else? Fine. You talk shit about Michael Clayton, I will.
That is the one exception to the rule.
Yes, I'll be
Yes.
very, very upset.
Yeah.
Have you
Make
ever seen
make
that
your
movie?
identity. I've actually not seen it,
Have you
so
ever seen Michael Clayton?
so you guys might see the end of the podcast right here. I don't hate it. I just haven't seen it. So
I'm gonna swat Kino just for that one
yeah.
comment.
Oh
No,
Jesus.
no, that is excellent film. I love it.
I mean, I have I
Amazing.
have like film, again, like stuff like that I love to death. And again, Sopranos is one of that stuff. But um, memes aside, it's like people make media. We've talked about this a bunch. People make media too much of their identity, to the point where I wonder how they can function when their whole persona or whatever is wrapped up in either loving something or hating it. I think both of those are not good to base your identity around.
Yeah, as someone who like really loves it, and part of my income is based on it. It's even me. I'm like, guys, especially the guy like people who are commenting, and it's like you're not even like getting paid or like have a creative outlet about any of this.
Yeah,
You probably should not be getting this like
yeah,
goon brand over it.
I get, yeah. And again, I for some of those guys, I get why they are like that, because if they do have a way to monetize that hate or monetize that love or whatever, then it's like, no, I get why your whole persona is based on hating Marvel or hating Star Wars or whatever, because it obviously makes you a lot of money doing it.
Speaking of which, funny enough, because I mentioned this to you before, because I just saw me and my girlfriend just watched it on Netflix because we're trying to get caught up on all our the Oscar movies. We're actually doing pretty good this year. We're actually up on most of the main contenders. Um, is we just saw Maestro, the Bradley Cooper
Mm,
film. It was okay. I have a lot of it's a movie that has like a lot of individual parts are good, and then a lot of individual parts are bad, and
yeah.
so the movie as a whole is kind of just like it's almost worse because of that, because there's good parts where you're like, oh, I wish this was more of the focus, and then all this crap that um kind of got in the way was gone. But um well, the reason I bring it up is because Bradley Cooper is getting a lot of uh crap, because while he is, I don't know if he's I don't know if I would say he's the favorite to win Best Actor, but he's obviously like a main contender. Um, the role he's playing is like very Oscar coded, Oscar baity.
Hmm.
And it's a lot of people are kind of turning on him, or kind of going against him. They don't think that he does, both him and the film, because they think that he is trying it's almost like you can tell so badly that he really wants to win an Oscar
Yeah.
that people almost like are turned off by that.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that, because on one hand, I do think that um, there is something that kind of is a turnoff about that. Like when you see an actor who's like, they kind of have like this sort of like self-important vibe. Like I don't
Mm.
know if you remember when Anna, not Anna Kendrick, she made fun of her when Anne Hathaway won her Oscar for Les Miserables. Um, she was up on stage and she looked down at her Oscar and was like, "It came true." And it's kind of like, it's like, or like Sally Field, like, "You
Yeah.
like me, you really like me." Um, I don't know. I think we
It
like
it's
it's
interesting.
yeah. But then on the other
Like,
hand, it's like, well, you're actors. Of course, you want to win Oscars. Why shouldn't you shoot for it? And it's like,
yeah.
yeah, that's a good point too. Yeah.
Well, but here's the thing, and this kind of goes along with what we were just talking about, which is like the Oscar is not just an award for quality. There is a monetization component to it where movies will make more money on sales because or at least in the past they used to make more
In the
money on like DVD sales.
past, not so much anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, not so much anymore, but let's say in the past, and also their individual career. Now obviously Bradley Cooper works and is going to continue to work, but there's a dirty business behind the Oscar. I watched this video back in the day that kind of talked about how studios really like play politics and stuff to try to secure the Oscar for themselves,
Hmm.
and that is a part of the reason why I think people don't really care about them as much. Like, yes, people tune into them and they want to see who wins and they get mad sometimes about it, but in general, I think people don't really look at the Oscars as a badge of quality as much anymore. And I think that's fair because again, there's a lot of great movies this year. Who's to say which one is better than the other? I think it's a pointless kind of argument. Again, it's prestigious for the people who win, and I'm sure they're happy. But in the same way that Mad Men and Breaking Bad went up against each other in the Emmys, it's like they're both great shows. Like, who gives a shit about which one is ranked better than the other? They're both fantastic.
It's also a shame because there's, in addition to like the whole politic game, is especially like there's a YouTuber I like, um, Be Kind Rewind. Um, Actually, hang on, I love her, so I need to make sure I did not butcher her channel title. Yeah, Be Kind Rewind. She usually does videos based off of like best actress races. But she did a video on uh the Harvey Weinstein scandal of 1998 when Shakespeare in Love beat Saving Private Ryan, and she goes in depth as to how like he bought that entire campaign with Gwyneth Paltrow, and he schmoozed the Oscar voters, and uh, probably the biggest Oscar upset of all time, all because of politics and business. Um, However, there's also be something to be said about legacy Oscars or like lifetime achievement Oscars, which I almost think is a more pervasive problem. So, like for example, with Bradley Cooper, a lot of people are saying it's like, well, he hasn't won one. He's been around. He's been nominated several times. It should be his year. And it's like, well, hang on. That's not. No, that's not how that works. That's not what we're talking about. This is the best performance of the year. Why are we taking into account a performance he gave 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even last year? Why does this matter? Funny enough, that actually used to be how Oscars worked back in like the very, very early days. I believe Best Actor and Actress Oscars were given for like an actor's body of work over the course of a year. But that was back when like, there weren't that many movie stars and like they weren't like these massive productions. So you could, actors would star in like multiple films per year. I mean, actors do today still, but like, even getting one movie out can be difficult for a lot of actors. Um, but there are plenty of like really notorious cases. Al Pacino lost Best Actor in 1974 for The Godfather Part 2, which Art Carney, I think, won, which a lot of people were like, that was just because he was old and they wanted to give him an Oscar. But then 20 years later, they gave Al Pacino an Oscar for Scent of a Woman, which was a good performance, but like, not even close to his best. And then Denzel Washington lost for playing Malcolm X. Um, and it's just like that. It's like this revolving cycle, and now Best Actor is less about like who actually gave the best performance this year and more, oh, here's this actor who's been around for a while, everyone likes him, let's just give him the Oscar. And then it fucks over people. Like, so for example, Emma Stone won uh Best Actress for La La Land back in I think 2016, which I don't know, it was okay. But now she's up for Best Actress for Poor Things, and she's really, really good in the movie. Probably her best performance. But it might hinder her win if she does win. It might hinder the fact that she won earlier, which is bullshit. Because it's like back in the '90s, Tom Hanks won two Best Actor Oscars in a row, Philadelphia and Forrest Gump. Like, there's so much of this crap that's like involved in it. It's like, why?
Yeah, again, it gets back to like what is the point of the Oscars? Like, why are we trying to rank guard? I mean, it's great to celebrate, you know, high quality cinema and high quality art, but there's so much other stuff that factors into it that makes me honestly just not care in the slightest. And in terms of like Bradley Cooper, like being kind of cringe for like so desperately wanting it, I mean, again, I get it. Like it is what it is. I mean, ultimately, I don't know. It's hard for me to really have an opinion. I'm like, is he kind of cringy for like talking about how he studied for 7 years to be to be a composer or whatever for that film? Like
Like, okay,
maybe it's a little like humble braggy, you know, but
that one
whatever.
part, that one part, I'm like, shut up. Like, because like not only is it like you said a humble brag, but also, and I am not like, to be clear, I don't want to like hate on conducting as an art form or as a skill. However, I feel like if it took you 6 years to perform what you did in the movie, I think he said like for like a 5 minute scene, that's probably not. That's probably more of an indictment on you. Like, there are stories of like Jake Gyllenhaal when he was in Southpaw, the boxing movie. He was like, "Yeah, I trained for 6 months." And it's like, yeah, 6 months is like pretty solid. That's a lot of training. You can have a very solid foundation, even pretty damn good. Of course, you won't compare to someone who's been doing it for like decades. Of course not. But like, no, 6 months is a lot. So if
Well,
you're,
there's a difference between doing it in a film where he knows exactly what he's going to be doing versus
yeah,
like
right.
is
It
he's
was
like if he's skilled enough to now go conduct in, you know, just for like music that he's not rehearsed for or whatever. Sure, I could see conducting being an art that takes years to master, but I
But then
don't
why?
I doubt he could actually do that. I doubt that he could you put him in front of the New York Symphony and start conducting. Like I think he would be in trouble there.
And if that is the case, that's really cool and impressive. But why is that? Why should that matter in regard to your performance? Whereas you
Yeah.
said you're rehearsing it and knowing exactly what you're going to do.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the crap when like that's another legacy Oscar that always bothered me when DiCaprio won for The Revenant in 2014. Probably like
Yeah.
his most like forgettable, maybe not
Yeah,
his
of
most
course,
forgettable,
yeah.
but like oh yeah, The Revenant. That's what he won Best Actor for. And I remember the campaign leading up to it was like, yeah, man, he was like acting in like -10-degree temperature, and it's like, so what? Like, so
Yeah,
fucking
it
what?
doesn't
Like, why
matter.
does this matter?
It was just people they wanted him to have an Oscar so badly because he hadn't won it
Oh,
yet,
I know.
and again it's
And he gave way better performances.
yeah, it's like again it's weird how it's almost something like you put in like your time to get rather than the individual performance of it. And
Yes. And at that point, it's like you said, what does it matter anymore then?
yeah, it would almost be cooler if they did Oscars like previously for like movies that came out decades ago, and if they still have the kind of staying power that makes true art. And it's like,
Yeah.
here's a great film we really recommend now, and it's stood the test of time. Like that would be an almost better system than just like here's the best film or best performance of this year, because I don't know, something can be really great this year but be utterly forgettable in the future, and it's like does it stand the test of time really?
And that kind of loops back to our discussion about, when we're talking about, is this a good year for cinema, bad year for cinema? It's really annoying when I hear people talk about this. It's like, oh man, there was nothing like this. Nothing that came out this year like is going to stand the test of time. And it's like, you understand that like most people were saying that about a lot of movies
Mm-hmm.
20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years
Like you
ago.
don't know.
Yeah, when Citizen Kane came out, it was obviously widely acclaimed, like the Academy, but it didn't really have its like status as it does
Mm-hmm.
now until like I want to say like 15, maybe not 15, like 10, 15 years later. Um, I think even The Big Lebowski when it came out, that's kind of like going from Citizen Kane to Big Lebowski, but um, even Big Lebowski is a film that like its stature grew over the years. A lot of cult films, a lot of
you,
films that kind of were almost ahead of their time.
Yeah. You know what though really annoys me is people who take the opposite argument too, which is like, guys, can we finally admit to ourselves that The Godfather is not a great film? Can we finally admit to ourselves that The Big Lebowski is overrated? Like it's way too popular or whatever. And it's like what do you want the film to be? Like what do you want from it? You need it to
I
be
know.
like perfect in every single way forever, and if it becomes too popular now, it's not good anymore. It's overblown. It's like the film is just trying to be a film, and at the end of the day that's all it is. And I don't know, people are so film discourse is so fucking annoying, especially on Twitter. I saw you posted your top you finally signed up for Letterboxd.
Yeah, finally. I was sick. I told you I was sick a couple days ago, and I was like, "Fuck it! I have nothing. I'm in bed. I have nothing to do. Might as well. I'll leave this as my last will and testament, just in case." I made an ABC list, which is like I gave my favorite movie for every letter of the alphabet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Took a while to find a couple of them. Um, However, I made my top 15, and it's subject to change, but I actually really like this list. I have Amadeus, Apocalypse Now, Bicycle Thieves, Cache, Doubt, Goodfellas, of course, Half Nelson, L.A. Confidential. That movie is fucking amazing. Lawrence of Arabia, La Samurai, Michael Clayton, Fuck the World, Old Boy, which is on Netflix now. If you have not seen it, go watch it right now. Although, uh, the subtitle track on Netflix fucking blows. The
Oh yeah.
translation is fucking stupid. And
Yeah.
or actually maybe I'm being ignorant. Maybe it's more accurate. But the subtitle track that used to be on the DVD
Yeah.
release that was released like way back is like way better. The
Yeah.
Netflix one's fucking stupid.
Yeah.
Sideways, Silent of the Lambs, and Unforgiven. Do you have a top 10, 15 list that you have?
I had Letterboxd. I haven't used it in a while. I don't like Letterboxd. Like, not I don't hate on it, but it's just I don't fundamentally like the idea of commoditizing your interest in films and television. I think it's kind of, again, people use Letterboxd as a way to be like, I have so much better taste than everyone else. And I don't like that. I recently signed into it again because you posted that, and I was like, I commented on your post. I said my favorites, and I was like, I don't care what this says about me or whatever. These are my favorite. These are the films I genuinely enjoy the most. And it was Once Upon a Time in the West, No Country for Old Men, Training Day, and Reservoir Dogs. And
Based. Nice.
I know there's plenty of people out there who would be like, "Oh my god, it's such a fucking normie tier list or whatever." It's like, and again, there's so many fucking films I've not seen. I don't try to watch everything out there, but I don't love that about the letterbox community. I feel like a lot of it is just kind of dunking on people and trying to be like, I have better taste than you, and I don't think that's the point of cinema at all.
Yeah. It's yeah, I think like that's too is like I'm just using it for fun. Like, oh, I saw that
No,
movie.
exactly. I think
I do
it's fun for people.
yeah, and I do like a part of it as I like Regis like I'm up to I only got a couple days ago and I'm already logged like 350 film ratings. And
Yeah,
I'm like, wow, I've seen a lot of movies. And I'm
yeah,
still going and I'm like, I think I've probably seen over 1,000
yeah,
at least, if
yeah,
not more. And I'm like going through them all and I'm like, wow, this is actually
yeah,
my whole history. And I'm thinking of like films I saw in high school and I'm like rating those. I'm like,
yeah,
oh, I have to rate all the James Bond films. I forgot.
yeah,
Um, so it's fun. It's like that. But
yeah,
yeah, I'm sure that I've seen on Twitter too, like the letterbox discourse is just as shitty. It's just
yeah,
like people way too far up their own ass, and it's like, okay, calm down, bring it down.
yeah. Again, if you're having fun with it, I think that's the only thing that matters. So,
Yeah, but then
uh,
when you get so stressed that it stops being fun,
yeah,
that's when you should put down the phone and go to bed or something.
exactly. Well, anyway, we've hit our hour here, so thank you all for listening. Thank you, Mac, for joining me for another year of this podcast, and
Absolutely.
stay tuned for the next episode coming soon.
Take care, yeah.